Hey guys, it's Kimberly from Fat Quarter Shop, and we're having our first quilting Q&A. So let's get to our first question. Lisa from Utah wants to know, how important is it to match thread in piecing? Any favorite colors? My two favorite colors to use are RFL Color 2000 and RFL Color 2610. I like to use cream, which is color 2000, for anything light. I never use white thread because it always shows through on my fabric and I like my thread to disappear. I use color 2610, which is really dark, on my dark fabrics, and even though this has a white background, I'm going to use a really dark thread so that my thread disappears. Using lighter thread is always going to show up more than darker thread, so if you're concerned, go darker rather than lighter. I always use 100% cotton thread, which is important when you're piecing, and I always pre-wind my bobbin. So I've got this, this bobbin box, and I wind all my cream and my gray, and then when I'm sewing, I never have to stop. Doreen from Nevada wants to know, can you give me some tips on how to square up quilt blocks? Sometimes, no matter how careful I am, the blocks turn out slightly smaller than they're supposed to be. Doreen, that's a great question, and you want to know what? My blocks are never the right size either. My blocks are usually 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch too small, and it's okay. It's all going to work out in the end. And Mindy asks, when do you use a scant 1/4 inch seam versus a regular 1/4 inch seam? Mindy, what I use is a 1/4 inch foot that has a guide on it. It's like a little silver thing on the edge of your foot, and I always just use a regular 1/4 inch seam. I never use a scant 1/4 inch seam. Even if a pattern calls for it, I don't use it. And you know why? I go fast. I put the fabric in, and I just pedal to the metal, go. So I use that 1/4 inch seam. I just never use a scant. Karen from Maryland is asking, is there anything wrong with pressing all your seams open instead of to one side when piecing? So when I piece, I just do whatever works for the quilt. A majority of the time, I press to one side. But if I've got a block that just has a ton of seams and is really bulky, I'm going to press open. The reason I don't press open all the time is it takes too much time and I'm always in a hurry. And Kim from New Mexico wants to know, where did you get your sewing table? The sewing table that we use at Fat Quarter Shop was custom built by a cabinet maker. So if you want something custom built, go for it. But what I use at home is just some regular furniture that I've had over 15 years that I got at my local sewing machine dealer. Most sewing machine dealers also sell furniture, so that's where I would start. Now, if you want to get something custom made, first start with the mat you want to use and then go from there. Maureen from Maryland is asking, how do you machine bind a quilt and make the back look perfect? So Maureen, my best advice to you is it's never going to be perfect. If you want to machine bind your quilts, you can either glue based, which I have tested a million times and it doesn't work for me. I think it's sloppy, ugly, I can't get it to work. We have another method where you can machine bind with pins, and we have a video on that, but I'm going to tell you it's never as perfect as hand binding. So I just do it every now and then when I'm in a hurry, but I've never found a way that makes it perfect. And this question from Patricia, I'm new to quilting and have a hard time cutting straight. Any tips? So my first tip is get a really good ruler. I use the Creative Grids brand, and the reason I do is there's little gripper dots that are going to make it harder to slide around, and this is going to be really easy for you to use. My second tip is start with a really wide ruler, because a wide ruler is heavier and less likely to slip around, and work on your hand pressure. So I hope those tips work for you. Rachel from Japan wants to know, how do you design patterns and write patterns? So Rachel, I'm so glad you wrote to me all the way from Japan. The first thing I do is I keep a sketch pad in my purse at all times, and I just draw things that inspire me. I also use the electric quilt software, but a lot of things in nature or my surroundings inspire my quilts. The best place to ever get inspiration is in Las Vegas. Just walk around all those really lovely hotels and casinos and look at the floors, and you've got a million quilts. You would not believe how many of our It's So Emma patterns are inspired by Vegas. Patty wants to know, if you choose to use triangle paper for a pattern using half square triangles, do you typically need more yardage to account for this? Nope, you don't need any more yardage for triangle paper. It's the same calculation as regular cutting. Michelle is asking, I'm a newbie at quilting. What size needles do you use in your sewing machine? Michelle, you're probably not going to like my answer. In my sewing cabinet, I just have size 70, 80, and 90. And honestly, I just grab whatever's there and use it. I'm just piecing. It just really doesn't matter to me. Lisa from West Virginia wants to know, how about mixing fabrics from different designers or lines? I suppose you would call it pulling fabrics from your stash to make projects. Any tips? I'm going to give you 3 names. Rita Hodges of Red Pepper Quilts, Lori Holt of Be in My Bonnet, and Aditya Sitar of Laundry Basket Quilts. They mix and match wonderfully, and that's where you should look for inspiration. I typically just stay with the collection. It's in my comfort zone, and that's kind of how I like to sew. But you should do whatever inspires you and whatever works best for your personality. I would say one thing that Lori has taught me is, if you love the fabric, you're going to love it in your quilt. And Brenda from Washington is asking the funniest question ever. Do you ever make mistakes? Brenda, I make mistakes all the time. When we're filming, the magic is in the editing. I sew starting at 9:30 every night, and guess what? I'm tired. I've had a long day. I make mistakes all the time. Thanks for watching Fat Quarter Shop's first quilting Q&A. Remember, have fun. If you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. Ask me more questions below and comment on our blog, and I'll be back to answer more of your questions. See you next time.